Hey Refuge Church, I hope you guys are surviving the heat this week as we continue to wrap up the book of Exodus, or the scroll of Shemot. We are coming into this grand climactic moment, and I'm so excited to look at this text with you guys. So let's jump in. God, I thank you for this story. I thank you that your word is living and active, a double-edged sword, which has come to do things in our lives and be efficacious. I pray for our hearts and our minds that they might be good soil that would receive whatever it is that you have for us to learn, and that your word would not go back void, but rather accomplish exactly what it is that you are setting out to accomplish. I pray that your spirit would attend to me, that I might speak clearly, effectively, and only whatever your words are. And then also that your spirit would attend to those listening, that they would be able to focus, find themselves free of distraction, really be able to zone in on whatever it is that you want them to learn today from your text. And thank you for all these things. In the name of your son, Jesus, amen. Okay, so when we were last here in Exodus, we were seeing this climactic moment, right? The people of God are parked between a potentially magic statue and some caves in the sea, and who comes up behind them but Pero and all of his armies. And Pero has strode out onto the beach, right? And this big moment. The people of God freak out, which, makes sense. And they come up with all sorts of narratives, conspiracies and confabulations we talked about last week of what they think is going on, complaints, and they're just shrieking it up to God. And Moshe steps in, and probably also the Moshe steps in, and he gives them really good advice, which we tried to hear last week, of that it is good to be quiet, find some stillness, cultivate and await and see what God is going to do, how he is going to work out our salvation, our deliverance. And so that was their back and forth. This week, we're going to continue to see the people of God spoke. Moshe spoke to the people of God, and now God is going to speak to Moshe, and we'll see what he has to say. So verse 15 of chapter 14 of the book of Shemot. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "What is it you shriek at me?" That's so good. Shriek is tza'ak, right? And we saw it at the very, very beginning of the book of Exodus. So we have this parallelism going on, because at the beginning, it says that as they were put under this hard labor, the people of God tza'ak, and it didn't even say that they cried out to God or they shrieked in prayer. It just says that they were shrieking, they were keening with the pain and the suffering of what was happening. And now here we have again the people and Moshe shrieking and God responding. Okay, so we don't have, by the way, recorded for us what it exactly is that Moshe was saying to God. Moshe did not see fit to record that for us, right? Very convenient. It just has God's response. So Yahweh says to Moshe, "What is it that you shriek at me, or are shrieking at me? Tell the children of Yisrael to journey." So I love this, because he doesn't go through one by one all of his conspiracies, or all the people of Yisrael's conspiracies of, okay, well, it's not actually that there weren't enough graves in Mitzrayim. There's actually plenty of graves in Mitzrayim, right? He doesn't go through all of our rationale. He just cuts to the core of what's going on and what they need to do next, which is pretty... It reflects the character of God in his kindness. He does not necessarily always waste time with us sitting there, well, actually this, and actually this, and actually this. He just tells us what the next step is, which is lovely. And here, the next step is to journey. Now, it could have been walk, right? We have all through Tanakh, all through the word, we have the command, go, walk, halach. This is not that word. This is vayasa. And vayasa is more like go on a trip. It's like Bilbo, right? I'm going on an adventure. It's more like that. Not quite a vacation, right? But God tells us when we find ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place and we do not know what to do, God's answer, at least for this people in this time, is to move forward and keep going. Journey takes on the connotation too that everything's not going to be luxuriously easy. If you tell yourself I'm about to go on a journey, it's more like less of a cruise around the Mediterranean and more of a walk along the a trail, right? That's more of a journey. And I'm reminded when I see this word journey come up in this particular spot. The first time I went to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, in 2016, my teacher passed on this teaching from his teacher, in which he was talking to us about what to do when it feels like everything is wrong, and you're not sure what you should do, whether go back or forward or stay still. And he marched us through a thicket of thorns that was like up to my waist. He's a lot taller than me, nearly a foot taller than me, so might have been a little bit easier for him, but I was following right after him like a good student, and I got stuck in the thorns. My husband and I spent like 20 minutes afterwards just picking out all these thorns from our legs, and I got stuck trying to be the good student, right? And George carved a new path, my sweet husband, through the thorns, which is even harder because he wasn't stepping in the steps of the teacher in order to help pull me out and help show me where I could step next. Very kind. But the point there of that teaching is that if you're stuck in the thorns, standing there and going, is not the solution, right? If I just had a mental breakdown there and just started crying, not only would that have been embarrassing because all the other people were there, but it wouldn't have helped me at all. I needed to find the way to keep going, to keep striding through the thorns, to make it out to the other side of this thicket. So the people of God here find themselves in that spot. They're in a thorny place, and it would be easiest just to have a meltdown. But God tells them, go on, journey on. Don't just walk, journey, tsa'a. And so for us, application-wise, we find ourselves in a thorny place, whether we are currently attending or serving in a church that has abusive practices, that teaches abusive things. That is not a place that blesses us with flourishing and spiritual nourishment. Sometimes we have all this inertia and we want to stay in our thorns. We're like, well, I'm used to all these thorns sticking into my legs. This is my normal, and I'm just going to camp out here, and who knows, maybe I'll wake up in the morning and someone will have pruned the thorns away. Maybe. But here we see God saying, you're stuck, move forward. You're stuck. You do not need to be in a place which is abusive to you, which discounts your dignity as a woman or a person of color or someone in the queer community. You can vote with your attendance and leave. That's just one application out of so many, right? But a helpful one, I hope. Journey. Okay, so going back, and Yahweh said to Moshe, what is it that you shriek at me? Tell the children of Israel to journey. And you, speaking to Moshe, lift up your mate. The word mate is staff. Staffs in their culture, both Egyptian and Canaanite, both of their cultures had this thing, and Assyria to the north, where your staff was a symbol of your leadership. We have this still in European culture with a scepter, right? The person holding the scepter. So scepters are a lot heavier and better to whack people with, but the mate is really just a branch. So later with the 12 tribes of Israel, we'll see each leader of each tribe, each elder, old person, has a staff, and it's their symbol of authority. And so Yahweh says to Moshe, spend less time shrieking, more time telling the people that there's going to be a way to go forward. We're going to push through the thorns together. And you remember that you're holding in your hand this symbol of authority. Not only a symbol of authority, but a symbol of authority that's been used to do crazy magical miracles in the past few chapters, right? We didn't spend a lot of time in the plagues. We only spent 1 week in the plagues. But it had turned into a snake and turned back again. He's used it to turn the Nile into blood, this whole thing. So he says, remember, you're holding onto this branch. This branch, of course, you can think of as being a branch off of the tree of life, to say, I have this wisdom and I have this life and I am going to lead my people after it, right? Because you kind of follow this branch behind you. So I was listening to the wonderful Pastor Inez Velasquez McBride last week, and she was talking about how your circle of influence is not the same as your circle of worry. So you might have a really large circle of worry, and if you try to use your leadership, your authority in that circle of worry, you might not be able to be very effective. So instead, put aside your circle of worry, which could be the whole world, right? You're worried about global warming, all these things. And instead, look at your circle of influence in your workplace, in your family, in your community and culture, your platform. How can you use your mate, your leadership, your piece of the tree of life, your authority to do something? Yeah, so for us as well, we can also hear for us, lift up your mate on whatever it is that we are supposed to be doing. So he says, and you lift up your mate and outstretch your arm upon the sea. So I love this because going back, Exodus 6, if we go and reread that real fast, you might be familiar with it if you're used to celebrating a Passover Seder. There's these promises that God tells his people over and over, especially at the outset of Exodus. He says, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from the forced labor of Mitzrayim and rescue you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am the Lord who brought you out from the slavery to Mitzrayim. Okay, so the key part that I wanted you to hear there was with an outstretched arm. We have this repetition throughout the text. Whenever they forget what they're supposed to be doing, God shows up again and re-gives a mission statement and re-gives a mission statement. And it always involves an outstretched arm. So we tend to imagine that that's the outstretched arm of God, right? Bringing his people to himself. But here we see God tell Moshe, no, outstretch your arm. So here's the crazy, amazing thing about God and what he's doing in the world, right? Is he doesn't just say, hey, you're my people, come get this front row seat to what amazing things I'm doing as I bring kingdom crashing into earth. That would be awesome. And he does say that, be my witnesses. Tell this story, testify to the things that I am doing. He also invites us to come along with him and to be his means for putting the world back together, to be his means for the good news of the reign of God, the rule of forgiveness and love and shalom and wholeness and peace and flourishing and justice for all people. He calls us to be the means of that coming out. So he has told the Israelites, I will rescue you with an outstretched arm. And now he tells Moshe, guess what? You're that outstretched arm. So often we lose that connection between I'm here for your mission because I love your mission, God, and I'm going to do it following what you have told me to, because his ideas are better than ours, right? So sometimes we get really wrapped up, sometimes our ego is involved, sometimes a panicky feeling is involved of like, oh my gosh, we've got to save the planet. And every time I go to the grocery store and I go to pick out my produce, there's these little plastic bags and I have to put my produce in these plastic bags, but those plastic bags are going to take like 1,000 years to degrade. I need to find a better solution, or do I just put my produce in the cart? Is that dirty? I don't know. We get so wrapped up in whatever. And maybe that is God's call in your life, to find little ways to bless the planet more, to steward creation better. Maybe that is exactly what he's calling you to, but maybe it's something completely different, like go and volunteer as a reading partner at the underprivileged school next to you. And maybe we have reticence to that and we're not sure. But the thing about being the outstretched arm of God is that we need to be listening to exactly what it is that God has for us to walk out his means, because this is his mission. That's what meekness is, right? Taking all of your strength that you have and choosing to lend it over to a larger mission, being the ox under the yoke. That's meekness. So for us to say, I'm happy to be your outstretched arm, and I will wait to hear exactly where it is that you want me to do that. So take up your staff and outstretch your arm over the sea, exactly in the place in your life that God would have you to. And that's why all of the previous sermon was about stopping and listening, creating a place of stillness, being able to tap into what it is that God would have for us, because we are not that great at figuring it out all by ourselves, especially if we don't take the time to center in, remember what our values are, and remember why we're doing it, and remember what the outcome will be. Because if Moshe had just come up and said, okay, I am God's servant and I'm going to fix this problem, right? We've got an army here, we've got the vulnerable here, we've got Pero standing out there. If I was Moshe, I would have been like, okay, I trust God, I'm gonna find my biggest pitchfork I can and go running at Pero, right? God can protect me from arrows. That would be my guess of, if I was Moshe, what I was supposed to do. But instead he says, I'm going to make a new way. I'm going to make a highway through somewhere that no one else has gone before. And so he calls him to be up around that. Okay, so he says, here's the whole section here. And you, ve'ata, lift up your mate, lift up your staff, your branch, and outstretch your arm upon the sea and divide it. So this is creation talk, right? At the very beginning, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, and the waters were chaotic and tohu vavohu, chaos in a blender, teacher said. And God speaks, and there's light, and God speaks, and the waters divide. That's one of the very first things that happens. And so here we have these waters, and Moshe stretches out his arm over the face of the waters, and the waters divide. So what does that mean? Cool illusion, Elle. It means that this new creation, right? We found that in some of the Noah motifs from last week. We saw that God is doing a new thing, and a new world is about to come post the flood. Here we have again the creation story. Stretch out your hand and do this thing, and a new world for the people is going to be on the other side of this journey. So we, on the behalf of the marginalized, claim our authority and our leadership over our circle of influence and our circle of influence. Do the thing that God has told us to do, and watch a new world of justice and peace, love and kingdom pop out the other side. That's the hope, right? And going back to what God is saying, and divide it, and will come the children of Israel between the sea in dryness. I love that it says that they'll come. It doesn't say send them. It doesn't say tell them to go. It just says they're coming. Like a baby that is just showing up. You don't exactly have control over when that baby is coming. The new people of God are about to pop out the other side of these waters, like they're being born. They're coming. In dryness. I love this. There's not even a puddle, right? Their feet aren't even going to be like sopping on the other side. If you didn't know this story, you had never seen the movie, you've never heard this preached or anything at all, and you had to imagine how the people of God were going to escape Mitzrayim. I would guess that they were going to run into the caves that we heard foreshadowed earlier, maybe go fight the Egyptians like we just heard, or maybe they're going to like swim, right? Because if that's their other option, maybe they're going to swim across and like barely make it, or have like a miraculous level of strength to be able to swim across this whole thing. God doesn't do any of those things. He makes a new way, because that's who he is. Waymaker, great song. And not only does he make this new way, which doesn't involve violence and death for the people of Israel, or terror as they have to flee, or great acts of strength and exhaustion for them to swim. They just get to walk, and they get to be dry and comfortable while they do it. That's the character of God and the sweetness of God. I love that. Sometimes we're expecting slavehood, right? Oh, they're going to take us back, or oh, you just brought us out here to die. And what we get instead is dryness, being comfortable. Okay, so first he said, Moshe, you say this. No, tell the people to do this. Ve'ata, you do this. And now he says, Ve'ani, and I. First thing he says, and I am here. That's all we need from God, right? Is to know that he is here. Okay, and I am here. The heart of Mitzrayim is a place of hardness, and they will come after them, being the people of Israel. And I will make heavy in Pero and in all his forces and in his chariots and in his horsemen. And Mitzrayim will experientially know that I am Yahweh, who has made them heavy, the Pero, the chariots, and the horsemen. Okay, so we've talked about this a bunch already. Don't need to review it another time. But translators with a certain culture have overlooked some, chosen to overlook some things that are in line with their culture, that God is somehow glorified in the death of anyone, but instead it's this picture of them becoming heavier because of their Egyptian picture of justice. Go back and listen if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Feather of Ma'at, all of that. They're becoming heavier every time they choose to act against justice and act against creation, right? And so he says, I will make them heavy. We would expect if it was like, I'll glorify myself, there would be different grammar there, but rather he's causing them to become heavy. So he's calling them to account for the things they have done. They will not be able to wriggle away from what their choices are, and sometimes that is justice. Okay, so here's what I want us to take away from this. Again, next week we're going to have this angel of God show up. Oh boy, a bunch of stuff happen and it'll be really fun. But before we jump into that, here we see God giving out orders, right? This is what you need to worry about. This is what you need to worry about, Moshe, and this is what I need to worry about. He says, and I'm here, and I'm going to take care of your enemies. We spend all this time worrying about our enemies, all of this mental energy. Your enemies can be people who don't have the same worldview as you, can be the people who make you angry, right? That's what the word enemy means in Hebrew, someone who makes you angry. It can be someone in your family, it can be someone in your past, a past church, a past workplace, it could be like not bad that person makes you angry. It could be a moment of injustice, a history of oppression that causes you to look at this person with anger. God's call to Moshe and his people and to us through this book is to let us worry about journeying, leaders worrying about using their leadership and listening to what God is having them to do, and God to worry about the outworking of judgment and our enemies. Byron Katie Mitchell, is known mostly by Byron Katie, is a wonderful teacher who has these amazing handholds to help people navigate their interior world, what they're worrying about, and how to think through whatever problem they're facing. But one of the things she says is there's only 3 circles for business. There's things that are God's business, there's things that are your neighbor's business, and there are things that are your business. And we love to confuse those. So for instance, the example that she likes to give a lot is if there's an earthquake, that's God's business, about why and etc. If your neighbor's yard is messy, that's your neighbor's business. If your neighbor's yard is messy and you are angry about it, that's your business. So your business is to deal with your anger, your resentment, your bitterness, everything that you feel, all the ways that you're bringing suffering upon yourself every time you look out the window and you see their messy lawn. Your job is not to moderate your neighbor's business. And we conflate those a lot. So in the election, for instance, we really want the bad guy to know that he lost. Not only does he need to lose, he needs to be made he needs to know in his heart of hearts that he lost, and we need to make sure that happens is the impulse that we see a lot. Not only must justice be done, they need to know. And here we hear God saying, I will experientially let them know why this has happened, why they have brought this judgment down upon themselves. That is God's business, not ours. We get to worry about, how am I doing today? What is my circle of influence and what can I do? Not waste our energy in other people's business, our enemy's business. Does that leader know how much they damage people? Now, if you're still in the middle of an arbitration of something that went down and you still have open lines of communication, it is absolutely within your purview to go and to, if you're leaving a church, potentially give the letter to the church or have a conversation to let them know why you're leaving. That's totally okay. I'm not saying that that's not okay. That is helpful to those leaders to be made aware of where their people are going. However, sometimes we're driven beyond that to try to let that leader know, hey, I'm still thinking about you and I still think that you suck, right? That's not our business. We should do what God has asked us to do, and integrity and uprightness, and walk that out well, and then to go on and leave absolutely all of the rest to God. And God will do it. God will do the most just thing way better than when we could ever plan out ourselves, right? So instead, let's circle around what we can do. We can know that we're on a journey and decide not to get stuck in those thorns and decide to keep moving when we don't even know where we're supposed to go. Just push on through the thorns, get out, make that a priority. I'm angry. Okay, let's try to find ways to help myself, not just stew here and make this our new identity is I'm a thorn lady. This is who I am, right? That's not the narrative. Secondly, identify our circle of influence, which is different than our circle of worry. Thank you, Pastor Inez. And choose to use our leadership and our authority through the ways that God has asked us to use our leadership and our authority. And then to go forward, leaving everything else to God. Let that be a weight taken off of our shoulders that we do not have to take care of all of our enemies. Not our job. Not our job what the people on the other side of the political line think. That's their business and God's business. Our job is to watch and walk our own path, our own journey. Wonderful. I'm going to pray, but just in case you're the kind of person who clicks away after I pray or before I pray, there is going to be no sermon next week, no online service or in-person service, because next week is the 4th of July. If you are of the persuasion that that is a wonderful thing to be celebrated, please go enjoy. If you follow in the tradition of Frederick Douglass and say, no thank you, I'm not going to celebrate that, enjoy that as well. Go up to Canada. Did that one year. It was great. All right, now I'm going to pray. God, I thank you for this story. I thank you that you call us into quietness and stillness, that we can hear what you have to say. Help us to find those spaces, to carve out those spaces. I pray that we would be faithful to lifting our staff, to not standing on the sidelines and saying, oh, wee little me, I don't have any authority in this world. I don't have any influence. Show us where we can make a difference, Lord, even in our own household. Help us to use all the gift and calling that you have given us, not to achieve our own ends and ideas, but your ends and ideas, for they're always going to be better than ours. I lastly ask that you would help us to let go the fate of our enemies, to let go worrying about what all the other churches are doing, what all the other religions are doing, what all the other political parties are doing, what everybody else in our family is doing. Let us just let that go and trust you with it, that you are going to accomplish whatever justice looks like in that scenario. Help us find freedom in that, to go out with a new lightness of being. I thank you again for this text and ask that you would have your will be done in us this week. Ask all these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, translation questions in the PDF. File sharing software is hard. And then links to give if you want to support our church, and links to sign up to join our discussion or to come to in-person services should also be below. Great. All right. Stay cool, you guys. See you soon. Bye.